You mentioned about the high cost of California is one of the problem, and on the other hand, also the homeless issue, not only in big cities now. As governor, what can you do to address those issues?
Well, one of the things that we need to talk about, again, getting back to the family, uh, California, as I mentioned, the population, black population in California is 6.5%. However, I saw a study from the Housing Urban Development Cabinet that 40% of the homeless is black. Again, I believe this stems from the breakdown of the family. I also understand that only 2% of the homeless population is Asian American because of the strong families in the Asian American community. So we need to have a real healthy discussion about the breakdown of the family because downstream it causes many of these problems that we're talking about. Now, as far as the homeless population currently, some percentage of them, I don't know what percentage of them, are schizophrenic. These are people who are of danger to themselves and to others. And they need to literally be removed from the streets for their own protection and for the protection of the rest of the homeless population. And they need to be put into mental institutions. The rest of them are addicted to alcohol or they have mental illness problems and they need to be treated. The government has shown its inability to treat people effectively, but there are churches and mosques and synagogues that can do it. There's a big mission in Orange County that is a church-related mission, and they've been able to remove people off the streets and make them far more self-sufficient in ways far better and more efficiently and more effectively and more cheaply than can government. But after that, we need to have low-cost housing so the homeless population can be housed somewhere. I spoke with the former Secretary of HUD, Dr. Ben Carson, who had a plan to use large areas of federal property to build low-cost housing because the federal property would not be subject to the environmental rules and regulations of California. They can build homes far more inexpensively than can the private sector, and then the homeless people can be put there. Also, I noticed in Houston, the city of Houston in Texas, they have a no encampment policy, and they have enough housing, cheap housing for all the homeless population. So you don't have nearly the serious homeless population in places like Houston that you have in Los Angeles and in San Francisco. This can be done. It will take a while, but it also took a while for the population to get this bad. Gavin Newsom ran for mayor in San Francisco in 2004, and he promised to end the homeless population in 2014, in 10 years. It was even worse when he left. And when he became lieutenant governor, by the way, he claimed he had nothing to do as lieutenant governor. Well, he could have fulfilled his campaign promise to do something about the homeless population. Well, I will. I'm going to get churches involved, and I'm going to unleash the power of the private sector to build low-cost housing. And I'm going to use federal property to place homeless people there in homes that are far more cheap and can be built by the government.
If you're elected, you'll be just a 1-year governor. So what do you think, and with the supermajority in the state legislature, so what do you think the effectiveness of this governor, if you're elected?
Well, it's going to be challenging, obviously. I'm going to be in court probably the entirety of my administration filing lawsuits. But I'm going to declare a public emergency on housing. As I mentioned, one of the reasons our housing prices are so high is because we have a housing shortage. We need 1 million units or more here in California. The average house right now in California just hit $800,000. That's 150% more than the national average. And one of the reasons houses are so expensive, according to Leo Hanian, who's an economist at UCLA, he says the average price of a home in California is literally 50% more than it would be if it weren't for laws like the California Environmental Quality Act, so-called CEQA. I'm going to declare a public emergency to suspend CEQA so there can be more low-cost housing built. I'm also going to declare a public emergency on water so that these projects I just now mentioned can be unleashed. I'm also going to be pushing choice in public education. I'm also going to have a line item veto. I'll be able to veto a lot of stupid bills. And believe it or not, a bill that's been vetoed here in California has not been overridden, even though the legislature is dominated by Democrats, has not been overridden in about 40 years. Turns out when you're governor and you explain to people why you vetoed, for example, a job-killing bill like AB 5, the legislatures do not have the gumption to override it because their constituents call them after the governor has explained why he vetoed the bill. and they put pressure on the lawmakers not to override that bill. I'm also going to have the power to appoint many of the members of these very powerful commissions, like the Coastal Commission, like the Public Utilities Commission. And I'm going to reverse the attitude of the Public Utilities Commission, which is all about forcing more and more power to come from renewables like wind and solar, which are unreliable. There's been a war on oil and gas. There's been a war on fracking. These are costing middle-class jobs and also making our power grid more and more unreliable. So those are some of the things I'm going to be able to do when I become governor. But I'm sure I'm going to be sued by the various special interest groups, and I'm sure I'm going to have resistance by these Democrat lawmakers. So I'm going to have very good and very smart lawyers, and I'm going to really go up there to try and make changes. I'm not going up there to make friends. I'm under no illusion. I know that I'm going to have a hostile legislature, but these are just commonsensical kinds of things. We're not providing enough power. We're not providing enough water. We're not providing enough safety, and we're not providing quality education. These are common sense things, and with the bully pulpit and with my ability to explain things in ways that I think the average Californian can understand, I think I'm going to put pressure on these lawmakers to be far more sensible and to pass legislation that really will improve the lives of the average Californian.
With such a deep blue state in California, and also, the voters elected legislature so that it became supermajority in both houses. So how do you think you can get the votes, not only from the Republicans, but also from Democrats and independents to be the governor?
Well, I had that very discussion with the former governor, Pete Wilson, one of our last Republican governors, and he told me to do this. When you get to Sacramento, let the Democrats know that if they don't empower Republicans, if they don't bring Republicans into discussion as they're considering legislation, you're going to veto those bills. And as I mentioned, a bill that's been vetoed has not been overridden in 40 years. And Governor Pete Wilson said, you'll be surprised at how much more sensible the legislation becomes. And again, I'm going to have the ability to declare a statewide emergency, which I intend to do, as I said earlier, on housing and on water. I do have a line item veto. I do have the ability to appoint very powerful members of the various commissions that are making lives miserable for Americans. And I'll have the bully pulpit. I think a lot of Californians don't realize how bad things are in California, how powerful the teachers union is in California, and the extent to which teachers union are stopping kids from getting a quality education. I'm going to have regular press conferences where I'm going to explain these kinds of things to Californians. And I think that when I am done, that more and more people are going to become disgusted with the Democratic Party, disgusted with the power that they've had over things like the logging industry, over housing, over schools. And I think a whole lot of people are going to rethink their allegiance to the Democratic Party and become more and more sensible and become more and more independents and, dare I say, become more and more Republicans.
How do you convince those Democrats or independents to vote for you in order to be into this position?
Well, because rising crime doesn't have a color, doesn't have a party. The rising cost of living doesn't have a color, doesn't have a party. The rise in homelessness doesn't have a color, doesn't have a party. And the fact that Californians are leaving for the very first time. This state is 170 years old. And as I mentioned, not just millionaires and billionaires are leaving, although many of them are, but middle-class people are leaving. People making between $50,000 and $100,000 are leaving. And there's a magazine called CEO Magazine. It's been around for 17 years, and they've looked at things like the cost of living, taxes, spending, the power of the public sector unions, whether or not there's a business-friendly or business anti-friendly attitude. And for 17 years, California has been determined to be the worst state in which to do business. 17 consecutive years. There are other metrics too. There are other studies that have shown the same thing. California is either last or near the last in terms of job creation, in terms of the rate at which houses are being built. For all these reasons, not just Republicans are upset, not just independents are upset, but Democrats are upset. And I believe I can make the case that the reason for this is because of the power of the left-wing lawmakers in Sacramento that is making life more unaffordable for Californians, making the school quality continuing to decline for Californians. And I think I can make that case. I think I'm going to win the hearts and minds of a lot of Democrats who in years past would never even consider a Republican. I'm not radical. I'm just common sense. I'm just good judgment. Again, the number one job of government is to protect people and property, and crime doesn't have a color. This war on the police is going to stop once I get to Sacramento.
You lived in California almost 70 years, as you said. Previously, had you at any moment that you wanted to run for governor or imagined you would be the governor?
No, I ran for fifth grade class president. By the way, I ran against a Chinese American named William Moy, and I beat him 3 rows out of 4. But that's the last time I've ever thought about running for public office. And I thought long and hard about doing this because I feared the power of the public sector teachers. I feared the power of the public sector unions. And I knew that I would be facing a very hostile legislature because 2/3 of the lawmakers in both the Senate and in the Assembly are Democrats. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought I had something to bring to the table. I've been talking about these issues for 27 years. I'm on in every major market in radio here in California, from Sacramento to the north down to San Diego to the south. I have a newspaper column that I've been writing since April of 1998, once a week. My column is carried in the largest newspaper in the Valley here in Los Angeles. It's carried in the largest newspaper in Orange County called the Orange County Register. So I've been talking about these issues of crime and of homelessness and the rise in the cost of living and the fact that people are leaving California for the first time for a very long period of time. And I felt that I'm the best candidate of all of the ones to communicate these ideas. So for all those reasons, I decided to jump in. Mm-hmm. And I've been surprised at how well my candidacy has gone. I'm far ahead of my Republican rivals. The only thing I'm worried about is the first part of the ballot. And as you know, 50% of Californians must vote to recall Gavin Newsom. 50% plus 1 must vote to recall Gavin Newsom. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how well the Republicans are who are vying to replace him. So I want to remind Californians of what this man did, that he ignored science, had his own kids enjoying in-person private education, exempted his own winery from the very mandates that he was putting down the throats of Californians while sitting up there at that French Laundry restaurant with the very people who drafted the mandates that they were violating by not wearing masks and by not engaging in social distancing. He's an arrogant elitist who does not bear the brunt of the policies that he has put forth. We have real problems with the cost of living, real problems with the cost of fuel, with the gas tax. He's a rich guy. He doesn't feel the effects of that. But the regular blue-collar workers and middle-class workers in California do. There's been a war on the middle class in California. Rich people can afford to pay the extraordinarily high taxes. We have the highest state income tax in the country, 13.3%, and you add the other taxes. It's not uncommon for somebody in the high end to have a 60% tax rate. And nearly half of all our state income taxes come from the top 1% of taxpayers. And many of those people are leaving, making our tax structure very, very volatile. For all these reasons, California has become increasingly uncompetitive against states like Tennessee and Florida and Texas, all of which are attracting a lot of taxpayers, and they're bringing their California, all of these states are attracting a lot of Californians rather, and they're bringing their taxes with them. So California is suffering, and I'm going to be able to reverse this. And that's why I'm reaching out to everybody, not just the Asian American community, not just the Hispanic community, not just the Black community, but everybody. These are all commonsensical kinds of things that I think I can reverse.
Because of those irregularities, a lot of the voters are actually concerned about this special election in California. Some people feel helpless and feel doubt about it. So what would you say to those voters?
Well, I would say to those voters, we have a voter integrity project. We have lots of lawyers all ready to file lawsuits. One of the reasons that Donald Trump failed is because he did not file the lawsuits in a timely fashion. Courts are very reluctant to overturn an election. So I want people to go to electelder.com, electelder.com, not only make a contribution to my campaign, but also if you note any irregularities, any shenanigans, report them, because we have lawyers all ready to go, all ready to file lawsuits in a timely fashion. But I'm quite concerned about voter fraud. As you know, you can now even print your own ballot under certain circumstances. So in my opinion, the potential for fraud is quite high. But I'm also confident enough that so many people are upset with the crime and the rise in the cost of living and the fact that people are leaving California and the rise of homelessness. But I believe there are going to be so many people to vote in favor of recalling Gavin Newsom, so that even when they cheat, they're still going to lose.
So finally, what else would you like to say to our audience?
Just be sure to vote for me if you believe that you're unhappy with the quality of public education, if you're unhappy with the rise of crime, if you're unhappy with the outrageous homelessness, if you're unhappy with the fact that people are leaving California and businesses are leaving California and California is overtaxed and overregulated, please vote for me. I'm going to restore common sense and sanity in Sacramento when I get there. So go to electelder.com, electelder.com.
Thank you, Larry, for sharing with our audience.
Kathy, thank you very much for taking the time. God bless.